Game Theory Class 10 Video 1. In this video we're going to do an introduction to probability. This might seem like a bit of a random thing to do considering we're studying game theory, but for the remainder of this course, the topic in game theory I want to discuss, it requires some basic probability. So I'm just going to spend this lecture to build up the foundational knowledge for probability, and then from next lecture onwards we're back to game theory. So this is going to be a very fast recap, or if you haven't seen probability before, a very fast introduction to probability. So let's begin. First of all, an important definition. Okay, the idea behind probability is you want to study experiments, and I use the word experiment broadly. By experiment, I mean any sort of situation where you measure the outcome of an experiment. So by experiment, I could mean like flipping a coin, rolling a dice, or like having a child and it being a boy or a girl. Like any situation where the outcome is random is what we're interested in. So we consider an experiment where the outcome is random, but we understand the set of all possible outcomes, right? Like if you flip a coin, it's heads or tails. If you roll a six-sided die, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we consider an experiment where the outcome is random and the set of possibilities is known. Then two definitions. The sample space is the set of all possible outcomes, and we denote this by capital S. So it's the set of all possible outcomes. So if you're flipping a coin, the sample space is just heads and tails. Simple as that. And an event is any subset of the sample space. So for example, if you're flipping a coin, an event could be heads or tails. In fact, let's write this down. So let's do an example right now. So I'm going to flip a coin. Okay, the sample space S is going to be equal to heads and tails. I'm just denoting it by H and T, heads and tails. And some possible events are, well, you could have the event of getting a heads, or you could have the event of getting a tails, or you could have the event of getting a heads or a tails. Any subset of the sample space is an event, okay? So this one here sort of corresponds to getting a heads, this one here corresponds to getting a tails, and this one here corresponds to getting a heads or a tails. So I'll do another example. This time I'm just going to consider rolling a die, a six-sided die. Now the sample space is what are the possible outcomes? Well, the possible outcomes are just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And some events that could occur, well, I could have simple events, like I could roll a 1, or I could roll a 2, and so on and so on. I could have more complex events. I could say something like I could roll a 1, 2, or 3. I can even write events in a different manner as long as I'm unambiguous. So I could say even, and what this means is the event that I roll a 2, 4, or a 6, because they're all the even numbers, right? So even is the event that I roll a 2, a 4, or a 6. I could say the event that it's odd, which would be 1, 3, and 5. And you get the idea, I think. Okay. So maybe one more example. In this time, my experiment is I'm going to flip a coin twice. Okay, I'm going to flip a coin twice. And in these sort of experiments, I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but in these sort of experiments, it's important whether to consider the order or whether I'm doing it simultaneously. I'm going to flip it twice, which means I'm going to flip it once and then a second time, which means there is an order. There's like the first flip and the second flip. So the sample space for this will look like maybe my first flip is a head and my second flip is a head. Maybe my first one's a heads and then a tails, or maybe it's a tails and then a heads, or maybe it's a tails. This is the sample space for flipping a coin twice, where what this means, so for example this one here means first flip equals heads, and the second flip equals tails. That's what this means. Okay. And some events, well, I could have the event like a simple event tails, that's very simple, or I could have an event which is like at least one heads. And if you think about this, this is the same as heads, tails, and tails, heads. Okay, it's just another way. This is just another way of writing this. Okay, so this is sample space and events. That's the end of this video.